tax policy if you become governor?
Sure. Basically the opposite of what we've seen in the last few years. I mean, you have, a study just came out actually a couple weeks ago, a national study that showed that the gap between the rich and the poor in this country is bigger than it's ever been before. Bigger than it's ever been. The 400, there's a statement that came out yesterday in the national newspaper. The 400 richest people in the United States have more wealth than the entire economy of Russia. The 400 richest people in the United States have more money than the bottom 150 million people in the United States. So you have this, something is changing in this country, which I think is a real shame, and that is this country was always based on, yeah, there were always some people that were very wealthy and some people that were poor, but most people were middle class. And they either owned their own home, or they owned their own land, or they could farm for what they needed. And that has been changing more and more and more rapidly. And the jobs that are being created are more and more a few people at the top and other people at the bottom. Now, did Governor Kasich create that? No, that's been happening for a lot of reasons. International economic trends and national policy. There are a lot of reasons why the rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer. But state government can either help with that situation or make it even worse. And if you look at their tax policies, it's literally, their tax bill that they passed, signed into law on June the 30th, literally made rich people richer and poor people poorer. I mean, we've had a policy in this country for years now that if you're really at the bottom end of the income scale, we're not going to charge you income tax. Because why should we be taking money away from you and then looking at social programs that might help you at the same time? It doesn't make any sense. We'd be taking it out of your pocket on the one hand and putting it in your pocket on the other hand. So for a long time, if you've made, in both for the Ohio income tax and the federal income tax, if you didn't make a certain amount of money, you weren't going to get charged the tax. And then certainly, if you were on the lower, even if you had to file Ohio income tax, if you were on the lower end of the income scale, you weren't going to pay at as high of a rate. If you made more, you pay more of a rate because you have more of an ability to pay, right? And I think that's fair. And that's what my basic philosophy is, that it should be based on an ability to pay. Now, what do they believe? They believe that everybody should pay the same rate. That might sound fair, but look, if I'm paying 10% and I'm making $15,000 a year, and I'm paying $1,500 a year in taxes, how's that going to affect my life? What things am I not going to be able to afford because of the $1,500 that the government is going to take from me? Does it mean I can't afford my rent, or my mortgage, or my medicine, or my food, or my transportation? Now, let's say I make $10 million a year, and I'm charged 10% of my income. What did I not get because of the $1 million? I've got $9 million that I've got to somehow figure out a way to live on. So it's just a question of, how is this country supposed to work? And if you've done well in this country, it's because of a lot of reasons. It's because of what your choices that you made, but it's also because we've developed a country here where people can profit and succeed. And I think that it makes sense for people that have done very, very, very well, either because they inherited money or because they earned it themselves, that it makes sense for them to carry more of a burden than somebody that's in poverty. Now, for a while, the Republicans were talking about what they would call flat tax, where they'd say, well, we think everybody should pay the same percent. They don't talk about that anymore. They don't talk about that anymore because most people would say, that's right, Herman Cain used to talk about 999. But when you would ask the average voter, they would say they didn't agree with that. They'd say, well, I don't think I should pay the same percentage as Donald Trump or something like that. It doesn't make any sense. So if you notice, what they're doing in Ohio now is, they don't say they're going to implement a flat tax. They don't say that. But what they are saying is, we're lowering the income tax and we're raising the sales tax. The sales tax is a flat tax. So if somebody pays a sales tax on groceries, they're going to pay the same if they're a billionaire than if it's a huge chunk of their monthly income. So they've said that their ultimate goal is to completely eliminate the income tax. Well, what's going to happen? They've already shown that for the amount that the income tax has gone down, the sales tax has gone up. So we're going to keep going up and up and up under their philosophy on sales taxes and property taxes. And we're going to keep going down on income taxes. So what it means is they're headed towards a flat tax. So I oppose the things that they did. We're going to come out with a proposal actually this week to try to get the legislature to repeal this homestead exemption elimination. So we're going to keep making proposals like that. I'm going to have a real fight on my hand with this legislature because most of the legislature agrees with the governor on this thing, on these issues. But that's something we'll have a real disagreement about. I've got time for a couple more questions if there's anything else on your mind. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, this is twofold. The first part might be moot and you might not want to. Okay, I'm curious your thoughts on why Governor Strickland, who I'm a huge fan of, but wasn't able to fix the school funding issue.
Yeah.
And then, what do you see yourself doing to stop what Governor Kasich has already put in motion for public schools? And you already mentioned public school. Your wife works in the public schools.
She does, yeah.
And
I graduated from public schools, and I mean, we believe in public education. I've supported every school levy in my town. I was mayor of my city of Lakewood,
right.
and I'm very, very supportive of public education. That's the bedrock of our education system.
Yeah.
Now, if somebody wants to pay for their child to go to private school, and some of my kids, that's fine. My kids have also used public schools for different activities too, and that's fine. But I don't want a system where you have to pay for your child to go to private school. I'm going to give you a bit of a long answer, but school funding has the solution to school funding in this state has eluded pretty much every governor. But let me go way back in Ohio history. Governor Gilligan passed away a few weeks ago, and they had a memorial service for him down in Cincinnati and then also at the State House. And he has four children. One of them is the Health and Human Services Secretary for President Obama. All four of his children have been very successful. And they all gave eulogies for him. And they talked about how one of the things that Governor Gilligan was always known for was creating the state income tax, which was passed in 1971. But what people have forgotten is, why was the state income tax passed in the first place? And the reason is because of education issues. Now, not solely that, but mostly because of education issues. Why? Because prior to 1971, school districts were almost entirely funded by local taxes. Now, what's wrong with that? Well, what's wrong with it is you have a system of winners and losers. You have wealthy counties that can fund their schools. You have poor counties that can't. By the way, and I come from a big urban county, it's not the urban counties that were suffering the most. It was rural counties that just didn't have enough of a tax base. So you had school districts in the 1960s that were literally shutting down, saying we cannot even provide education anymore for our children because we're not getting enough help from the state. So the state income tax was passed in order to support local schools. Now, that whole dynamic of the state providing help for local schools so that all the burden wasn't on local property taxes, that argument has been going on ever since, and it has never been completely solved. In the 1970s, there were school districts that started to close again, and the state came in and did things to help. By the way, one of the things that the state did to help was they started paying 12.5% of every property tax levy. They just pulled that out. Now, in 1997, the Supreme Court said that the whole funding system was unconstitutional. Why? Because the state constitution says that the state has a responsibility to make sure that education, K through 12 education, is funded adequately. Well, if the state just throws its hands up and says, well, it's all up to the local communities, then that system is unconstitutional. So what happened after that? Well, at the time, Governor Taft was the governor, and they put a little bit more state money into local education. I'm sorry, it was Governor Voinovich and then Governor Taft. Well, the Supreme Court looked at it again and said, no, it's still not constitutional. You got to do better. When they said better, what they meant was the state taking more of a role so that it's not based entirely on local taxes. And then the state put a little bit more money in, and the Supreme Court said, no, it's still not good enough. And then at a certain point in time, the court, a couple of the justices got defeated, and the new majority on the court said, we're not going to interfere on this issue anymore. So it never really has been solved. Now, I think Governor Strickland was dealt kind of a bad hand because he had a terrible economy and he had to end up cutting back on funding. But he, in some ways, he was trying, I believe he wanted to have a system where the state was playing more of a role. Now, what have we had happen in the last 3 years? We're going back to funding levels that we haven't seen in decades in this state. Because we're going back to an old, they're taking away the 12.5%. They cut over $2 billion total out of education in their first funding. And if you look at what they are saying is the solution, they're not saying the solution is that the state should be doing more to help local schools. What they're saying the solution is private, for-profit charter schools. The only school systems that are, they're not even systems, the only parts of the school system, overall system, that has done well in the last 3 years are for-profit charter schools. And by the way, they're the only parts of the education establishment where the people running it make enormous donations to the Republican Party, and I don't think that's a coincidence. They're also the worst performing schools in Ohio, which the legislature has refused to really hold them accountable. Why is it that Republicans at the state level love to talk about holding teachers accountable? They're very critical of teachers, but they never talk about holding charter schools accountable. I really believe, and I mean some of them have said this openly, some of them have not, but I really believe that their philosophy is to privatize education.
Absolutely.
They want to give everybody a voucher, and everybody will just take it to wherever they're going to take it. That is going to absolutely devastate public education. So their solution to the education problem is just, well, we'll give everybody a rebate and we'll give everybody a check, and then they'll do whatever they're going to do. There's no country in the world that has successfully educated their children using that philosophy. The countries that are beating us economically, and we are losing economically in many, many ways, the ones that are beating us economically are ones where they're really making a real investment. Again, not just K through 12, but early childhood education and post-secondary education. Let me just tell you one thing, finally, that we're trying to do, a couple things that we're trying to do in my county. I didn't really talk about what I do now, but I run the biggest county in Ohio. It's Cuyahoga County. It's 10% of the state. It's the biggest budget after the state budget. We've had budgetary problems, but we didn't solve those problems by cutting money to education. As a matter of fact, we put more money into education. We put more money into early childhood education. Because one of the things that we need to do in this state that we don't do right now is make sure that when kids start school in kindergarten, that they start ready to learn. There's this huge gap in this country and in this state where you have kids that are starting kindergarten with a 5,000 word vocabulary, and you have other kids that are starting with a 500 word vocabulary. And that difference is the biggest determinant of their educational success for the rest of their lives.
It's actually a 30,000 word deficit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, what we try to do is put more money into universal pre-kindergarten. And by the way, this doesn't have to be a Republican issue and a Democratic issue. There are Republican states like Oklahoma that have said, we know that early childhood education works and we're going to put more money into it. We're not doing it state. I want to tell you about one other program that we're doing, which is just a piece of the solution. It's not a total solution to it, but it's a piece of it. My county is becoming the first county in the United States where every single child that starts kindergarten, we establish a college savings account that the county holds in trust for them. We put a small deposit and we hold it for them to accrue interest for them until they're ready to graduate from high school. When they graduate from high school, then they have access to that money, but they can only use it for either a 2-year college, a 4-year college, or vocational education. But the whole philosophy is that we know that a high school degree is not going to be good enough. I mean, if you look at the statistics, if you drop out of high school, you're going to earn less than somebody that graduates. If you only have a high school degree, you'll earn less than somebody that has a 2-year degree. If you only have a 2-year degree, you'll earn less than somebody that has a 4-year degree. It's a step upwards economically. Are there any exceptions to that? Yeah. I mean, there used to be a time in Ohio where it was very practical for people to just say, I'm going to get out of high school and I'm either going to work on the farm or go in a factory and I don't need much education. It's not like that anymore. I wish, you know, maybe it'd be nice if it was, but it's not like that anymore. And we're not making the decisions that even other states are. We're 41st in the country, 41st out of 50 states now in college achievement. But you don't fix that when kids are a junior or senior in high school. This young lady that I was talking to, she's getting ready to do something in nursing. But if she hadn't had the right educational background starting in kindergarten and first grade, she didn't all of a sudden get to where that can be her aspiration when she's 16, 17, 18 years old. And we're not being strategic about that. I have time for one more quick question, and then I probably got to get on the road. Anything else on your minds?
How do you feel about medical marijuana?
I knew I should have asked. You know,
or just marijuana, you know, like let's join Colorado and Washington.
Yeah, I'd have to see the way that it could be implemented here. I haven't taken a position on it yet in the campaign. I'll tell you this, I was a county prosecutor for 5 years, and I do think that nonviolent drug offenses are clogging up the criminal justice system, and it's a waste of money. When I was a prosecutor, the people that I wanted to really put in jail were the people that were hurting somebody else by using a weapon or violence of some kind. Those are the people that need to be segregated from the rest of society. And I will tell you this, and I've been asked the question several times, and it's one of the few questions, we haven't taken a position on it yet on the campaign, but there's a huge difference that we've got to make sure that everybody understands between the harmful effects of different kinds of drugs. It's not, are you for drugs or are you not for drugs? I'll give you an example. I'll tell you the drug that is devastating Ohio right now, and it's not marijuana. It's heroin. It's heroin. Do you know that we're on pace in my county for 200 people this year to die of heroin overdoses just in my county? 200 people. Now, 6 or 7 years ago, it was only about 40. And by the way, it is linked. If you don't know this, we just started the task force that we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office and other people, and also Board of Health and folks that are trying to provide drug treatment. Heroin has become what people move to after they get off prescription painkillers, believe it or not. So somebody gets hooked on OxyContin or something like that, and because OxyContin is so expensive, they end up going to heroin because it's cheaper. But it is absolutely deadly. It's one of the most addictive substances known to man, and it's very, very easy to overdose. And for those people that are dealing it, now those folks I do believe should be incarcerated because it is an absolutely deadly substance. And it's happening all over Ohio, by the way. It's not just a big city problem. When I was a prosecutor about 10 years ago. People that were using heroin then were hardcore drug users in the inner city of Cleveland. That's not what it is anymore. It's a suburban drug too, and it's a rural drug too. And there's been no, I've been talking to, I didn't talk about this before, but when I was talking about the local government cuts, that's affected local law enforcement. And so what local law enforcement is telling me all over Ohio is we've got drug dealers coming down from Chicago and Detroit, and we've had to slash our drug enforcement here.
Oh, yeah.
They just had a big, huge drug bust here.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it. I believe it. These cuts. I know you folks here. I know there's a lot of Republicans here, but here's the not in this room, but in this county. But here's what I would love if I was running for a local office in Holmes County. Here's what I would love to hear a Republican defend. The Republican Party is supposed to be for local government, small government, and it's supposed to be for lower taxes and smaller budgets. The state budget is bigger than it's ever been. They have raised everybody's taxes, and they took all the money and put it into the state budget. The state budget that Governor Kasich signed is bigger than any state budget has ever been. It's bigger than any budget Ted Strickland ever signed into law. And they took money away from local communities and sent all the money to Columbus. How do you defend that if you're a local Republican? How do you defend The money that you pay in taxes that used to go for schools and local government here in Holmes County is now making a one-way trip to fund the biggest budget that the state government has ever seen.
I don't think anybody knows that. do
It's
they?
so hard to follow that trend for
Yeah.
us to really know. It's-
Yeah.
So here's what I need your help with. We have 14 months before the election. By the way, I want you to be optimistic. I know when you live in a Republican area, sometimes it's easy to get discouraged. But don't be.
It's almost
honestly.
required.
Yeah.
That's right, that's right. Well, I grew up actually amongst some very conservative folks, so I've lived that before, but keep this in mind. We've won 4 out of the last 5 statewide elections. We won in 2006, 2008, 2011 with Senate Bill 5, and 2012. We lost in 2010, that's true. So we've been doing very, very well, actually. We don't do so well in the legislature because that's because the legislature is gerrymandered. So governor's race is a fair fight in terms of, they haven't figured out a way to gerrymander that yet. Last poll that was done, I was at 38% and Governor Kasich was at 35%. So we've got a good shot at this thing. But here's what I need your help in doing. Not just, working on the campaign when we come around. That would be great, of course. But what I do need help is with you. In every single county, we're going to have some kind of effort. Now, we may win Holmes County, we may not win Holmes County. But we want to do better than we've done before in Holmes County. As I said before, Ted Strickland only lost by 77,000 votes. That's not a lot of votes to make up. And if you, maybe I'm only ahead by 3 points right now, but all those issues that I talked about, whether it was education or taxes or local government, people agree with us on these issues. Not by 3 points, but by 10 points, 15 points, 20 points. So as I always tell people, the most powerful thing in politics is a conversation between two people. And that's not a television commercial, it's a conversation. And what I'd like your help with in the next 14 months is starting that dialogue in every single county. And if they want to defend this record, this lousy record that we described today, then good luck to them. But we need to make them defend it in every single county. I want to hear local officials here tell us why Governor Kasich has been good for the schools and local government, local law enforcement, public safety, all these issues. I want to hear it. I'd love to hear it.
Do you have anything on paper that says what he did?
We do. You'll get it later. Some of it we have online right now. We're actually going to release a website called kasichcuts.com where you can look up your county, type in your county, and it'll tell you what the cuts were in your own particular county. So we'll keep providing that information to you as time goes on. We're awfully early. I mean, it's 14 months before the election.
Yeah,
But sooner the better. Sooner the better. So we'll try to get you that information as soon as we can. I got to get to my next thing. I appreciate you coming out. Thanks for spending time with me.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you
all.
for coming.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for coming out. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for coming, sir. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you. Good to meet you. Thank you. Great to meet you. Thanks.
Mom and Dad.
Your question.
Good talk.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Good.
All right.
Glad you liked it.
No.